Well, hi, and welcome to this, our final in our series as we've journeyed with Jesus through from Palm Sunday through to Resurrection Sunday. I hope these series of meditations have been helpful for us as we've journeyed from sorrow into joy. Don't forget that we have our Resurrection Celebration service. You can find that on our YouTube channel, Northcote Baptist Church. Mark writes, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him." The word on the street that Sunday in the Holy City was almost too good to be true. This was so unexpected, so stupendous, such a dramatic reversal of the heartbreak and devastation of the previous 3 days. This would take days to sink in, weeks even. In some ways, it would take his disciples the rest of their lives to grasp the impact of this news. He has risen. Indeed, for all eternity, his people still will stand in awe of the love of God on display in Christ's death and the power of God bursting forth in his resurrection. No one truly saw this coming, except Jesus himself. He told his disciples plainly that he would be killed, then rise again. He had hinted at it as early as the first temple cleansing. At his trial, some testified against him that he had made such an outlandish claim. But as much as he had done to prepare his disciples for it, a literal crucifixion was so contrary to their paradigm that they had no meaningful way to bring it into their minds and hearts. It was a stone of offense and a rock of stumbling, as Isaiah writes in Isaiah 8, for the long-awaited Messiah to go out like this. His men had abandoned their master in his most critical hour, leaving him alone to carry the weight of the world's sin. And the greatest burden of all, being forsaken by his Father. One of his own had betrayed him. The chief among his men had denied him 3 times. After his death, the disciples dispersed. "Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered," writes Zechariah. Their doors were locked. 2 even took to the road and were on their way out of Jerusalem. When news came from the women, it seemed like sheer fantasy. These words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them, writes Luke. It was beyond their imagination, but not beyond God. Could such a dream become a reality? Might there be, after all, some deep power that could turn back time? Better, might there be a power magnanimous enough to bring it in a whole new age, the age of resurrection and triumph over the final enemy, death itself? The initial report left them in shock. Mark tells us the woman went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Astonishment seized them. Had the news been less spectacular, perhaps they would have celebrated without hesitation. But this was far too big and far too surprising to melt into immediate rejoicing. They were stunned. That's what Easter does to the human soul when we own up to the reality of its message. That's how explosive, how cataclysmic, how world-shattering it is that Jesus is alive. It is a joy too great for instant gratification. First, there is utter astonishment. Then comes the mingling of fear with great joy, and finally the freedom to rejoice and tell others. But what now of his passion? What of his excruciating agony at Golgotha? Yes, as C.S. Lewis says, the dawning of this resurrection age will turn even that agony into a glory. Now joy has triumphed over sorrow. Day finally has dominion over night. Light has thrashed against the darkness. Christ, through death, has destroyed the one who had the power of death. Death, writes Paul, is swallowed up in victory. Easter now has become our annual dress rehearsal for that great coming day, when our perishable bodies will put on the imperishable, when the mortal finally puts on immortality, when we join in the triumph song with the prophets and the apostles. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? Just as rehearsing the details of Jesus' final days leading up to the cross prepares us for the fiery trail coming on us, so also Easter readies us for the triumph that will follow. Easter is our foretaste of glory divine. Christ has been raised. Day no longer is fading to black, but night is awakening to the brightness. Darkness is not suffocating the sun, but light is chasing away the darkness. Sin is not winning, but death is swallowed up in victory. Easter is not an occasion to repress whatever ails you and put on a happy face. Rather, the joy of Easter speaks tenderly to the pains that plague you. Whatever loss you lament, whatever burdens weigh you down, Easter says it will not always be this way with you. The new age has begun. Jesus has risen, and the kingdom of the Messiah is here. He has conquered death and sin and hell. He is alive and on his throne. And he is putting your enemies, all your enemies, under his feet. Not only will he remedy what's wrong in your life and bring glorious order to the mess and vanquish your foe, but he will make your pain, your grief, your loss, your burden, through the deep power of resurrection, to be a real ingredient in your everlasting joy. You will not only conquer this one day soon, but you will be more than a conqueror, writes Paul. When he wipes away every tear, our faces glisten more brilliantly than if we had never cried at all. Such power is too great to simply return us to the garden. He ushers us into a garden city, the New Jerusalem. Easter announces in the voice of the risen Christ, your sorrow will turn into joy, and no one will take your joy from you. Our sorrow will indeed be turned into joy. And for that we are eternally grateful.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the Church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Come on, if He raised you up, never shout to the King. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Sing praise, praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.